This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by Cornell Studio Supply, located in the gem city of Dayton, Ohio. Find all your pottery and ceramic sculpture equipment and supplies with the best customer service and world-class workshops. Join us January 16th through the 18th, 2026 for a colored clay and material inclusion workshop with Chris Alvashir and Jillian Park. Visit cornellstudiosupply.com to sign up. Cornell Studio Supply, owned and operated for potters by potters.
This episode is sponsored by Monkey Stuff. Monkey Stuff makes things for makers. We're inspired every day by the craft and creativity of makers and design and manufacture tools and accessories to try to make your making life a bit more delightful. Our products are designed in California, by makers and for makers, and manufactured in the USA. Check out our line of pottery accessories and tools at monkeystuff.com. Follow us on Instagram to see what we're up to in our studios, and keep on making great things.
Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 560 of the podcast, and also the last episode of 2025. Today I sit down with David Eichelberger, a longtime friend of mine. He has done so many different things in his career, including being a studio potter, professor, designer, and community educator. In this interview, which was recorded at the Utilitarian Clay Conference back in October, we focus on his personal studio practice as well as his role as a designer for 2-1 Ceramics alongside his wife, artist Elisa Di Feo. In our interview, we discuss how the pace of hand building shifted his aesthetic, working with bisque ring molds, and the collaborative aspects of design. In addition to his studio practice, he is also the director of the Marlboro Studio School, which offers craft instruction in Marlboro, Vermont, where they live. If you'd like to find out more about David, you can check out 21ceramics.com. I did want to mention that I'll be the juror of this year's 16th annual Workhouse Clay International Exhibition. The exhibition highlights functional and sculptural ceramic artwork being created throughout the U.S. and abroad, so please consider putting in a submission. The deadline for that is January the 11th, and there will be a link in the show notes to be able to go straight to the submission page. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. You're the longest person I know in ceramics because I knew you when I was a mere child.
Yeah.
You were also a mere child. Just a slightly older mere child.
You're 2 years younger than Jeremy, your brother.
Yeah.
You were the younger brother who Jeremy was always like, "Go away, Ben. We're hanging out."
That's exactly what he sounds like, too.
Yeah, it's been amazing to watch you, progress through the entire world of ceramics. You're everywhere, and you're connected with everybody, and really, in many ways, bringing this whole thing together with your recording of this oral history of it. There's always, of course, there's like books and papers and lectures and things like that. But what you're doing is a really important part of the record keeping. And I always notice when you're involved with anything because of the Roanoke connection. I'm like, what's Ben up to right now?
And it's nice to have or to acknowledge that like something was happening in Roanoke where multiple potters came out of kind of the same era. So at least in Roanoke, or the Roanoke adjacent, it's me, you, Josh Kopus, Aaron Weaver. There's something about education, arts education for high schoolers, that it was accessible. What was your first entrance into making pots?
I didn't make any pots in high school, but I did a lot of art in high school. I did a lot of illustration and colored pencil and watercolor drawings all kind of combined together, and really bright colored illustration. They didn't teach ceramics in a way that, I can't remember if they didn't have it at all at Patrick Henry, or if it was, I couldn't fit it into my schedule because I was going to governor school at the same time, and so it totally messed with the schedule. It was hard to fit everything in. I was going to a school on a separate school on campus that was sort of like a math and science magnet school. The art teacher, I was in there all the time when I had free periods, and I was working on illustrations and drawing, and I tried out some ceramics then with a wheel that you just turned on or turned off, no speed control. And they invented an Independent Artist Award to honor my work that year, but it wasn't even an award. They were just like, David's been in here a lot, but let's get something out for him at the year-end awards. It was really sweet. It was great. But it wasn't until I went to Virginia Tech, which isn't a far reach from what you're talking about. So it's not exactly high school art education in Roanoke or neighboring Salem. It was 45 minutes away, Virginia Tech. Those professors, David Crane, Sylvie Granatelli, Stacy Snyder was there after a couple of years. They were living in Floyd, Virginia. So I'm not sure if there's like a thread that ties all that together. Was it in the air, or was it in Roanoke City and neighboring art education systems? I don't know. But that's where I first got introduced to ceramics. Sylvie was my first teacher. I took a wheel throwing class with her.
I was listening to your lecture yesterday, and you were talking about being a thrower early on, and then switching, not exclusively, but starting to hand build more, because there's an intention in hand building and a focus in hand building that you can focus on the whole or parts of the pot to make the whole in a different way than you do when you're throwing. Mm-hmm. So when did you shift from being like I just love throwing pots to I'm going to make my pot, and my pot is going to be hand built or whatever process?
It wasn't an overnight transition. It was in stages and in steps, and there were some life changes that happened that made it easier to make those transitions. So I was mostly wheel throwing when I was a resident artist at the Energy Exchange in North Carolina, which is a non-operational residency now, but in 2004 to 7 is when I was there. And I was wheel throwing with with porcelain and doing some illustration on the pots, making all functional wares, sort of functionally adjacent wares. And it was towards the end of that 3-year period where, after practicing full-time all the time, I don't want to say like the skill level was high. I had just sort of plateaued where with the amount of skill I was seeking out of wheel throwing. It became pretty comfortable, and I kind of knew what I was doing. I actually still love throwing on the wheel, and I do it for part of my work quite often. And it's a very comfortable skill that I love using. But for the work that I wanted to make, what I began to see in the wheel throwing work was such heavy presence of the tool of the wheel. And so I didn't want that to be part of the conversation. I wanted the intent to take precedence over the technique. And so hand building might have been a little bit of a pendulum swing, not a rejection of that, but, a little backing away from that really clear wheel thrown look. And that was preceded by some throwing and altering and throwing and cutting and using thrown parts as slabs and all those stages, all those ways to use the wheel as a tool to accomplish a task. The way that I was doing it, I wasn't quite escaping this evidence of the tool. So I started doing building some larger objects at the end of that residency, so around 2007. And I say this a lot, but if I made 100 mugs on the wheel, I would probably really embrace 10 of them and love the outcome. And it would be just what I was looking for. In the same amount of time, I could make 10 hand-built mugs and probably like all 10 of them. So there wasn't any productivity gained or lost in the whole thing. It was a little bit of a slower, more intentional pace that, and the final object was able to hold on to all those 10,000 considerations that you have minus the efficiency of the wheel. Maybe it was like a rebellion against efficiency. It was like, it was a Luddite way of making pots. I actually love the Luddites, but that's a different story.
Well, you said in your demo yesterday an interesting thing about efficiency. You're talking about the order in which you were making something, and you said, I'm not doing this because it's faster. It's that certain parts are faster, so then I can be done with that part and work on the other part of the part that I really want to work on. So is efficiency in terms of not overall speed, but more, again, intention. Can you talk more about that?
I think efficiency is an easy word to use, and I just used it when I was thinking about the wheel because the wheel has the ability to just accomplish things with such a linear path, from beginning to end. But I think what I'm talking about more in the practice that I would do now is an economy of means, both in the process and in the outcome. So I'm just balancing where I want to spend my time. So I really, maybe if I'm making some bisque molds, they don't need but so much care. So I give them the time they need and then move on to the next thing. Asterisk, caveat, I have a really hard time doing that, and I will never escape the need to finish all things to some degree. Like it needs to look finished before I can move on. But maybe I'll sort of edit out a little bit of nitpicking, pawing at the edges for an hour when it isn't going to change the outcome. It's hard not to do everything like you would do anything and make the molds look nice if it needs to be that way. So the next thing look nice. So it needs to be that way. A little bit of that is just like honoring the whole process. And I'm not one to disregard something. It all feels like a situation, being able to be in the studio and make things feels like a real honor. And I treat my studio like a sacred space, and I really try and keep it organized and clean. It's never going to be like that all the time. You getting ready for a show, there's bubble wrap on the ceiling, it's everywhere, but I don't use bubble wrap, by the way. I only use paper products. It's all one big whole medley of things going on. So when you enter the space, that's part of the piece. You're the sense of the space informs the frame of mind to make the mold that then makes the piece that goes on the mold, and how you treat the slab, and how you fill the bucket with water, and how you squeeze out the sponge, and how you put your apron on, and how clean do the tools have to be, and how you line your tools up on the table when you're done. And then maybe if you want to have all the lights on, or just incandescent lights in the corner because the light's a little bit better and the shadow cast better. And then do you want to keep the fan on or turn it off so that you exchange the air, so the next day you predict you have some nice nighttime fresh air, or do you want that to go away and you want to seal it all up so you have a little bit more warmth in the morning? These are all considerations that fall into the gestalt of studio life.
Well, speaking of studio life, I was watching the demo, and you're using these ring molds, which slabs then go into the ring mold and create essentially it's any shape you can make the mold for. So in the case of what you were demonstrating, it was like almost like a soft rectangle that had 3 or maybe 4 bumps that bumped out on the top. But what I was thinking of watching you work is, how did you design your studio? Because one of the things you talked about is this process lends itself to working on 3 or 4 pieces at the same time. But do you have one really long linear studio that you work? What is your studio setup that allows you to work this way?
There's a number of considerations that go into it, and they're not totally removed from what you're hitting on, that there's rhyme to the reason. I'm sorry, other way around. Reason to the rhyme. I don't know how that works, but there's order of some kind. Not order in the sense of control. I don't want to mix those two words up at all, but there's a logic to it. And what you're pointing to and of making one piece and then another, because the timing and the mental processing works to then return to number one and go 2, 3, 4 and return to number one and go 2, 3, 4 and walk everything through this process. That has to do with mental and workflow. And so the studio that I share with my wife, ceramic artist Elisa Di Feo, is the focus is on efficient workflow, just so we're not spinning our wheels and wasting time when we don't need to. So our studio has one open aisle down the center. It's a bigger space, 1,800 square feet. That's like 60 by 30, with really tall ceilings in this old cotton mill, and it has an open aisle down the center. And that's partly so it's the trunk of the tree, and we can branch off of it in all these different directions. But it's also so we can roll a pallet down the middle on a pallet jack, because we get materials and they go all the way to the far end, because that's where the windows are and the vents and where we mix clay and where everything heavy happens is at the opposite end of the studio. So there's a reason for that to happen. And it's also the breathing space in the middle, and it gives it a little bit of, it prevents it from feeling overcrowded, even if the stations on the side get crowded. And then we have a packing area on your right-hand side as you go around the studio, a wet area for the sink and the wet sander that we use, a slip casting area where we use one clay, another slip casting area where we use a different clay, and a third where we use it's kind of a mixed area. We'll make some molds there. We'll make some cast with tinted slips there. And then at the windows, we have clay mixing. And then along the windows wall is where our kilns are. And as you come back up the studio on the left-hand side, you like this? I'm giving you a whole map. Are you creating a mental picture here?
I'm right there with you. I'm at the kilns.
I noticed. Yeah, you had your eyes closed, and I could see you're sort of like walking. Yeah, and then you take a step forward. Yeah, do you smell the clay? There's a little bit of, what was that, wax burning on the kiln? No, it's all vented, don't worry. Then there's a glazing station. Sort of like there's a tools area, a glazing station, so it's not far from the kilns, so we can go back and forth real easy. And then there's a couple of tables that we use for mixed projects. So if we have a small casting or a sampling, or it's kind of like a staging area for whatever doesn't fit the other areas, whatever needs to happen happens there. It's like the project area, sort of. And then we have a throwing area, because we have some couple wheel throwing projects. Our studio runs probably 90% of the products coming out are slip cast, and then 10% being wheel thrown. Essentially, that's the most that we do through our studio for the work that 2-1 Ceramics produces, that my wife and I make together.
We should say that before, when we're talking about ring molds, that's your handmade work that is being shown in art galleries and shown at Utilitarian Clay. And then 2-1 Ceramics, you work with designers as well as yourselves as the designers.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So how did it come that was the split of your labor, that you kind of had one body of work that was you under David Eichelberger, and then the second that was 2-1?
When I was a resident artist at Penland School of Craft from 2011 to 14, Elisa and I were there with our oldest daughter, Mina, and our second daughter, Louisa, was born there. And there was a lot of caretaking of the young kids at home, and it was basically impossible for us, both adults, to be in the studio at any one time. So we were trying to divide that up and make it work and figure it out. But what we ended up doing was, towards the end of the residency, we came up with some ideas that we could work on together, and neither of us were so attached to it that we couldn't take critique from the other. It became like a third party in this perfect way. So I could go up into the studio during the day, cast a whole bunch of stuff, get it to a certain point, go down, swap with Elisa. She goes up and finishes the work, casts some more that I finished the next day. So the two of us could work on this one thing that would represent both of us, but have a different identity than either of us. And that was mostly a way to accommodate parents and kids and working schedules. And it became this really incredible endeavor that we, collaborated on and still do. And then it grew. We moved from Penland to Virginia so I could teach at a college, and we were living in Floyd, Virginia. Elisa carried the business on while I was teaching in our garage studio, and she's a pro at doing that work. She's so fast and so good at it. She just blows me out of the water. She can go into the studio and make as much in an hour as it takes me 2 or 3 hours to do, not just because she's faster at the actual process, but because she can hit the ground running much better than I can. I can work for 12 or 14 hours straight without stopping, but it's a slow momentum to build. She's much better at just getting right to it and getting things done. So has an incredible skill set with casting. But when we moved, she was running that, and we got some requests through some, a friend of my sister-in-law, Elisa's sister, said, "Hey, can you cast this one thing for me?" She's a designer in New York, and we started casting this one thing alongside our stuff for that. That turned into 2 more versions of it, to 3 more versions, to 4 more versions. And then eventually we were making 2 or 3 or 4 objects for her. And then it was up to like 25 different objects of different colorways each. And then we were developing her projects, her new items, new tablewares. And it's been a really great fit. And then that branched off into new and more, and a whole wide variety of clients that we've worked with in addition to. So they come to us with an idea, and we'll walk them through the process of deciding if it's something that can be replicated in clay as is, or does it need some modifications. Sometimes designers have had clay experience, sometimes they haven't. So sometimes they come to us with pretty resolved ideas. Sometimes it's a sketch on a napkin, and we'll sort of like navigate that whole process. Usually it ends up being a Rhino wireframe drawing that we go back and forth and assess, and it'll be 3D printed, and then we'll make slip casting molds, because honestly, most of the time it ends up being something that's really suited to slip casting. Think modern era industrial design academic programs. They lead towards that, the way that product thinking trends is towards objects that there's no way to make but slip casting, right? It would only make sense unless you want to spend 3 hours hand building one object. It just doesn't make any sense. But casting does it perfectly, is suited for that. So then we'll do short runs of the product. So it can be anything from a limited edition that we'll make, or we'll make a run of 30 or 40 or 50 or more of them, and they'll go into stores, see how they respond. That's not our work to do. We sell directly to the designer, who then sells to retailers, and we help sort of figure out our end of the process. They take care of their own marketing, their own product branding, and all that. So we get to stay really busy making things, which is just great, and not ever have to fuss with the marketplace. I know that sounds like the worst business plan that there is, but we're very busy with the work that we manage through the existing clients we have. We're always open to new clients because we love great projects, and it's a lot of fun, and we're able to grow to meet bigger projects. But it's really, it kind of hits those, it strums the strings of a teacher to do that, because people come to us with an idea, and we have to look into the idea, sort of see what it is and what it means, why they're making what they're making, what's their intent, what's the purpose of this object, why are they so passionate about making it like this? Maybe even, often without even talking to them, just seeing the guts of the object as is. If it's not replicatable, then we need to figure out how it might need to be changed, while at the same time sticking with that original intent. So we have to pull that out of it, see how we can make little moves of angles, thicknesses of edges, whatever it might take, so that it can be made and not have a high failure rate or something like that. And then do that, or suggest that, in the theme that they started with. So that takes a little bit of critiquey teacher brain to do that. And then and then walking them through the process and talking to them about why it would work this way or that way, or what their ceramic object might be referencing in ceramic history, or even like, recent history that they might not recognize that it's pointing to. That can be something that we can inform them about, so then they can see if it's something that they want to be associated with or not be associated with. How does it work that way? So point is that it teacherfies us, keeps us on our toes. It's a really great relationship to have with them, with the process. We get to talk to real people. These are a lot of times pretty small scale businesses that we can relate to and work with, and it's nice to make those connections.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of over 4,000 objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfieldcollection.com. When you're first meeting a designer or maybe not a designer, just someone that wants to make an object, how do you explain the boundaries of what ceramics can be? Because if they don't have any experience in ceramics, they might decide that they want a 14-inch platter that's cantilevered on a 2-inch foot. How do you explain to them, like, no, ceramics melts in the kiln, so therefore let's change it?
Just like that.
Okay.
You're hired.
Nice.
You can be our spokesman. You and I sound enough alike, yes, that I'm just going to hand the phone over to you. You'll be able to just pick up where I left off and be like, don't you know the clay melts? Just like you would to anyone, it's fun to explain that stuff. Like, what a cool material. This is dug out of the ground. It's manipulated to kind of give you a consistent result. You kind of mix a little thing. You got your recipe, and it's going to have reasonably consistent outcomes. And it's our job. I almost pointed to both of us. I really hired you just then. It's David Eichelberger, Ben Carter, and Elisa Di Feo's job to be that source of information for them. So we consider it part of our responsibility. So the people coming to us, they wouldn't even begin to think of that as a concept. Often in that case, it's not all that common. But if somebody has no experience, they might consider clay to be, or fired ceramic to be, a little bit more like concrete, like it's put in place and it stays in place even though it's been through a kiln. So we get to be like, no, listen to this. It's like dirty glass, and it melts together. Like, zoom in with your eyeballs on the inside, and there's these little particles, and there's other ones that are a little glassy, and they get gluey, and they stick their neighbors together, and they all kind of lock arms, and it turns pretty non-porous a lot of times. I don't know, it depends on the clay you're using. So we get to sort of bring them into that process, and I have no problem talking to them on the phone for hours.
And do you make them pay a deposit to start the process? Because how do you keep from doing all this prep work, but then them inevitably deciding they don't want to do it?
That doesn't happen all the time. It is a little point of consideration. So it depends. We'll always have a conversation with anybody, right? And if we'll have sort of the preliminary conversation so that it's not like we don't pick the phone up unless they've sent us a check. Of course, we'll go through a lot of it. We want to make sure that's a good fit if we're going to start a partnership with anybody. I shouldn't say partnership. That's actually a business arrangement. If we're going to start working with anybody, we would want to be sure it's a good fit first. But we do have a starting fee that we charge people, and that covers, after the first conversation, this looks good, let's get the ball rolling, we charge a startup fee. And that is like a deposit. It covers our hours leading up to whatever it might be, prototyping or sampling or mold making or whatever the next steps are. It just covers our work towards that. And we will just accrue a charge over the course of time. And maybe it's glaze sampling, maybe it's clay sampling. All that just gets billed towards that original fee until we've exhausted it. So it's like a deposit, but they're really just paying us ahead of time, which is a deposit. I think that we use the word deposit a little bit differently. So when it comes time for a purchase order, we want to order 150 of the things that are ready for production from the molds that you've made for us, and we're ready to go. That's when we take a deposit, capital D. That's when we would say deposit. So we would say half of that order up front, other half when it's done. There you go. There's 1,000 exceptions to that. We'd also take a deposit if we were just making molds, or if we were doing it all, or doing it all as a big package, or sometimes people come to us with molds, which isn't. It's not my favorite thing, because it's always better to
make your own
looping back
molds.
to the beginning of the conversation. It's much easier to work with our own molds. There's thought that goes into the mold, decisions that are made that bring the mold to life and make it work, and it's much easier to make those decisions and then operate under them. There's exceptions. There's an unbelievably good mold maker, Robert Petro in Pennsylvania, who we love to work with his molds. He is top notch and just makes them so expertly. And I think I don't know Robert that well if we've just phone conversations, but I think we'll probably share a couple parts of the brain because his decisions are the same ones I would be making. So it's really great when some of the people we work with will go to him to get the molds made. Sometimes if it's because of a production timing, it doesn't work for us. Sometimes they've already had him make the molds, and then those will be coming to us. There's a whole lot of ways it can happen.
How have you learned from that process, which is almost an industrial process, small scale industrial process? How has that informed the, not one-off, but the other hand-built work that you make?
So I sort of got off track there a little bit, as Southern talkers are wont to do.
We take tangents.
There is a distinct line between what we're talking about, 2-1 ceramics, and then the stuff that I would make with my name on the bottom that goes to a gallery or an exhibition. And the 2-1 ceramics does a very important part of our livelihood and kind of keeps the lights on and keeps everything going for us. And it allows the time for me to operate in the studio to make exhibition work. It supports that, and because that doesn't have as consistent of a paycheck, obviously. So if I'm making things and it goes to an exhibition, you're not sure what you're going to sell. Those exhibitions aren't happening back to back to back to back across the span of the year. So it supports that, which frees me up in a lot of different ways. One, I don't have to rely on my work to sell in order to eat, which that's probably overstating it. Can you edit that part out? Because what I really should say is, if I don't sell it, I'm starving. No, the pressure isn't on to repeat the same work, to be highly predictable and sellable at all costs, and sort of fit a mold that can be a weird pressure to an artist that, at least to me, that I'm thinking about what other people are expecting David Eichelberger to make that he made before, and I want it to be the same, and I want that thing. I don't think that pressure is as strong as my voice in my head makes it, and I don't think anybody really is that upset about whatever happens, but it is a voice in my head, and it kind of bounces around, and it makes me feel anxious. So the 2-1 ceramics is a anchor point for our family that works to maybe quiet that voice in my head a little bit. When it comes time for me to be in the studio, I feel a little bit freer to follow my gut and kind of let it lead the way with some artistic choices. And then huge bonus, the studio, right? The studio exists and is paid for by 2-1 ceramics. And we work hard to keep that going so that we have studio to operate. I have more kilns at my disposal now than maybe I would normally, or resources there to operate with. So it really does support the work in a lot of ways. Not to say that it's not important to see some red dots. You know what I mean? It's my favorite shape and favorite color. Next time somebody asks, how do you glaze these things? I'd be like, I like red dots on the name tag. I mean, on the piece. Yeah.
Well, it makes me think about scalability, because in your hand-built work, if someone ordered 200 platters, theoretically you could make them. But at the end of that, I would imagine you'd be emotionally exhausted. Your hands would probably be hurting. But then in 2-1 ceramics, if someone orders 200 of a shape that you've been working on them with for 6 months, that can scale up and not seem to take the same emotional toll and physical toll.
100%. Yeah, because the second is all the work is done up front. You're looking at the object as a singular entity. It's a thing, and that thing will be recreated ideally with as much soul and spirit over and over and over and over again, all pointing back to original idea. With the 200 hand-built platters, it's a new one each time, and it doesn't have, even if I'm trying to make the same thing, the process is just too hands-on to have it be. It's like repeatable lowercase r. Like, yeah, you can make the same one, and it's gonna be a lot like it, but it hasn't been the ideation, the design of it didn't have streamlining as any consideration at all. It abandoned that. Not that it's intentionally slow and purposeful or anything or tedious. I'm not actually trying to make any more work for myself, which is probably an oxymoron coming from someone who works in handmade ceramics in the modern world. But the hand-built ones it wasn't a thought. It wasn't the plan to do that. It would be a lot more work to make 200 of those, right? Just the time of it would take more. So I would be happy to do that. I mean, that would be really a fun project. But do you have any buyers in mind? Which can you share your email list?
Yeah, I'll put the feelers out.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Well, I'm also thinking though about joy. So if you had to make 200 of those platters, I feel like that you might lose the joy because there is improvisation. Even though you're using molds, the way you're pinching means that each pot is pretty different. How you smooth the interior curve of a lobe or whether you don't smooth that is very different time to time. I guess what I'm trying to think about is that there's some ideas that lose conceptual quality when repeated, and then there's some ideas that gain conceptual quality when repeated. Do you have any thoughts about that, just as a maker doing both within a studio practice?
I mean, mixed into that, it's hard to, when you're saying that, it's hard not to kind of be excited about a big commission, and that just seems desperate. But that it does, that is like a little light that switches on. Like, wait, how many? They're not getting a price break, right? Tell them, hell yeah, I'll lose all the joy in my life for that paycheck. What joy? No, I'm totally joking. I see what you're saying. Exploration, excitement about the object. If I were making something by hand over and over and over, I don't know that it would take much away because there's joy to be found in all those stages of the process. So if I'm excited it feels good to smell the clay and wedge it a little bit. That sounds like way too head in the clouds, but that's not what I mean. It's just, it's a vocation that we've really worked at to build a skill set that we feel invested in and feel proud about. And so it's nice to use that. It's nice to put the work we've done to put it to use. Of course, it's easy to see like 200 of the same thing over and over kind of becoming a little Groundhog Day-y. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the slip cast stuff, the word slip cast or the term slip cast, when I'm talking to students that I've taught in the past and I bring up slip casting, I always say how great it is at, using porcelain in a way that would be challenging to do otherwise, or excellent at capturing detail, or really great for making more complicated forms that wouldn't be easy to do by other methods, or especially making lots and lots and lots and lots of the exact same thing to make a point and build content into the work. Slip casting as a process often becomes pretty synonymous with this idea of clone armies. I think that was an accidental Star Wars reference, and I did not mean to do that.
I was right there with you, though.
Yeah, no, you were nodding your head, and you were like, clone army. And that's not exactly the work that we're making. We make things within certain tolerances. If they need to be exactly identical, we will aim for that. But with a lot of clients that we work with, they recognize that there are variations to things and that the kiln has a role to play in the process, and things can be slightly different colors, depending on the exact firing or where they are in the kiln and the temperature that they get to, or that edges might warp or that things might lean a little bit. And we do our best to plan ahead for that and talk to the folks we work with about that, and they will just to give them reasonable expectations. So they don't feel exactly like clones. It's also nice to maybe put our thinking cap on the shelf for a little bit and just get to work and have the satisfaction of job well done and scratch off 40 pieces made today out of 200, and the next day 40 more, and the next day 40 more, and that feels good to have it in the books as well. This is really like a challenge. It's like I'm trying to find the joyless part of what we do, and I'm just struggling here, and I think it's intentional, and I don't want to find the joy. What are you trying to make me do, Ben Carter? You're like, where is it that you would lose joy?
Well, the thing is, I have a kid.
What is the hardest thing? You have kids,
and you've watched Inside Out. Do you know the movie Inside Out? There's a character called Joy, and it's played by Amy Poehler. And I now think about Joy as being this little girl that shows up in different worlds because I've seen this movie now. And I like to think about as artists is like, where do we consciously invite joy as if joy was a kid? When do we invite joy into our process? And when do we have to say, well, actually, logic is what we need to invite into the process? And you seem to be able to make 2-1 ceramic work that's super logical, but then still have fun and spontaneity. Like in your demo yesterday, I was really surprised at how fun, like it was like a comedy show while you're making these slab built pieces. And I could tell like you are jazzed about doing this.
You didn't know that hand building was this fun, did you?
I didn't. Yeah. I swear. It's
slab is like a punchline. It's like, just jokes aplenty. And when you roll those coils and you just can't stop laughing. It's like, once it gets started, you get a giggle fest when you're over there using like a little bisque mold and you get a ring. Oh, don't even start me with the ring molds. Oh my God. Those things are hilarious. Woo. No, I'm just joking. But I love that idea, that there's times when you're bringing joy in and you sort of, it's a pleasure to be there and to be included, and times when it's maybe a little bit more focused and it's not exactly the point of it. It's time to buckle down and do the work, and after every thing you finish, you're not blowing the horn and throwing confetti. We did one. It's like, yeah, you got 99 more to do. Can you get your shit together and start working? But it's always there. I think it's not like, is it there, isn't it there, or where is it, or whatever. It's just finding it where it is present. It's not a conscious choice to decide what's really exciting part of it and what's not, but it is a conscious choice to notice if it's something that you can kind of be into. There are things which are less joyful, and then there are things that are more exciting. Like, just ask Elisa how much I like packing pots. And the answer is not at all. Like, it makes my brain feel like it's going inside out. I feel like it's like it just frustrates me to know it, because I'm like, again, we don't use bubble wrap very much, but I'm like, this bundle doesn't fit into this box and it needs 2 inches on every side, or else if it breaks, they're not even going to insure it. And then I kind of like get all angry about it. And then Elisa looks at me and she's like, it's got 6 inches on every side. You're shipping basically a pallet for a teacup. Will you just chill with the can you do math? And for some reason, it's like just one subject, one topic that just frustrates me, and I can't. And then, so I find very little joy in that. I find a lot of joy putting the box, for UPS to pick up, but that's the joy of, thank God that's over. But Elisa is a machine, and will go in there and has a system set up for everything where she's very good at the joy of job well done. And so she can sort of align everything to that way of thinking.
To wrap up, can you plug both your Instagram so people can see the hand-built work, and then also the website and Instagram for 2-1?
Yeah. My work is at David Ike, and 2-1 Ceramics is at 2-1 Home. TWOONEHOME.
Sounds good. I was trying to check your spelling, but I can't spell. So I was like, that sounds right.
That's what was really in this Southwest Virginia educational system.
A lot of art,
that's something we share.
Lack of spelling.
I'll never be a good speller. I'm okay with that.
Well, good to see you, man. Thanks.
You too, man. It's great. Keep doing this great work. Really, we also appreciate that you're doing this and that you've been doing it for so long. Happy 10-year anniversary. When's the actual anniversary?
So the anniversary was about 3 years ago.
Wait a second. What? You just gave me a 10-year poster, dude. It's the 13-year poster.
Deadlines,
You didn't just get the 10-year poster.
No.
Okay.
No, I've had it for a few years, yeah.
Oh, I should know that, so you can edit that part on. Okay, well, happy 14th season. And thank you for the 10-year poster. 3 years late.
Oh, you're welcome. I'd like to thank David for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to catch up with him at Utilitarian Clay. I did want to thank Lindsay Rogers and the staff of Airmont for all their hard work for putting on the conference. I certainly appreciate being invited to be a part of that, and I'm already looking forward to that next one. Before we go, I wanted to plug a workshop that I'm going to be teaching May the 16th through the 23rd of 2026 with Stephanie Seguin called Interpreting the Flora of St. John. If you'd like to find out more about that, you can go to stjohnvipottery.com/workshops. I'll be back after the new year with a new episode, so I wish you all the best for this holiday season, and I will see you in just a few weeks. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.